Hi, Dylan Morrison here. Welcome to the last blog talk in my Desire series entitled The Walking Wounded. Today I wish to look at the topic of human community and its vital role in keeping us, the walking wounded, plugged into the freedom of the divine Queendom of God. First, let me start by saying that a faith group isn't necessarily a community, nor a community a faith group. We're surrounded by a swirling mass of recruiting groups, all flashing their community credentials, and yet we may still feel lonely on our journey into freedom, in the midst of such a pre-packaged flock. So then, what is a genuine spiritual community? Well, Yeshua the Nazarene followed the Eastern spiritual tradition of calling a group of followers or apprentices. Like many before him, his aim was to draw the motley crew into his own spirituality and experience of divine love. In other words, Yeshua was resetting the skewed desire settings of his followers by simply acting as a model of both divinity and realigned humanity. The desire flux that issued from the Galilean prophet drew his apprentices into a laser-like desire for the divine itself. Simply put, by living with him, his followers subliminally realigned their metaphysical desire goals. For desire operates in the hidden realm of the lower unconscious. Certainly, the experiment, like all spiritual endeavors, had its low points, with the old mimetic rivalry regularly making a dramatic comeback as James and John jostled for position, and Simon Peter tried to block Yeshua's final Jerusalem destiny. But on the whole, these men and women slowly learned to see all in light of Yeshua's divine Abba Father, the all-encompassing source of unconditional love. Today, as we follow the Nazarene into the gravitational force field of divine love, we discover, much to our surprise, that we're never really alone. For many, often in the most unusual circumstances, are also traveling alongside us on the way. The timeless call of the Nazarene to leave acquisitive desire behind by following him will always be heard by the sons and daughters of men. Yeshua himself boldly promised that where 2 or 3 are gathered into his name, he'd somehow be present. That sounds great, but what exactly does it mean? Is the spirit of the Nazarene regularly present when a few, or indeed a few thousand of his followers meet every Sunday morning under the Christian banner, in small wooden preaching stations or cross-laden cathedrals? Well, I believe not. Please let me explain. The most dramatic and somewhat controversial name of Yeshua, the I am who I will be, the mystical name of the Jewish divinity Yahweh, may hold a somewhat hidden clue. This verbal expression of divine being suggests a self-sufficiency, a fullness that lacks nothing, namely, a state of total detachment from skewed acquisitive desire. Is Yeshua promising us an experience of his own being as we align our desire centers with his? As we come into harmony with the Nazarene's own desire settings, shall we discover that those 2 or 3 accompanying us comprise a manifested oneness, a oneness that itself reflects the divine union. I believe that there are 2 forms of community that we can find ourselves involved in, namely Quasi Community, and Organic Community. First, let's look at Quasi Community. Well, this group of individuals appears, to all intensive purposes, to be the real deal. A committed group of folk who share a common purpose and vision, often under the guidance of a strong, charismatic leader, or, alternatively, centuries of regulated sacred tradition. Structure and ethos permeate the gatherings, providing the individual with a strong sense of security, a result of the group's subliminal law-keeping. In other words, the quasi-community's identity is cultural, resting on the ever-present foundation stones of myth, ritual, law, and structure. It has to be said that many faith groups fall into this predominant and populist category, and yet shockingly such groups are a clever but unconscious counterfeit of Yeshua's 2 or 3. Quasi-community is a gathering of the scapegoaters, those of us who define our group identity by who we aren't. The psychic settings of such a group are usually calibrated for defense and a level of emotional dishonesty resulting from its foundation of underlying fear. Organic community. Authentic or organic community takes root in the soil of human frailty and brokenness. An organic network of individuals have each had their skewed desire centers shaken to the core by a devastating transpersonal crisis. In their mutual brokenness, the wounded psyches of such battered individuals cry out for being and belonging, ultimately finding it in the call of the Nazarene, as reflected in the face of their fellow man. Such a community is, I believe, a gathering of scapegoats, those whose selection for victimhood by external quasi-community or inner self-condemnation has, paradoxically, united them in the shared space of aloneness. In organic community, acquisitive desire lies dead, well dead and buried. The ego games of quasi-community, irrelevant in the pervasive mimetic presence of divine love, the one victimized by all. Such a group isn't a pity party, or indeed a self-righteous, holy huddle, but a safe house for renewal and ongoing enlightenment. The place for self-forgiveness and the forgiveness of our relational model obstacles, the scapegoaters. In such a rare but sublime setting, the healing presence of divine love, as manifested in the Nazarene, is happy to dwell. Honesty is all that it requires from the ragamuffin band of broken humanity. With egos disengaged, spirit flow can provide mutual healing as brokenness touches brokenness. In such a context, Yeshua's last meal now makes sense. A broken body shared with its lifeblood poured out. The presence of the broken healer in a community of his broken humanity. Interestingly, I believe that it's no accident that Yeshua chooses the 2 or 3 for the revelation of divine immanence. The larger a gathered group, the less likely it's going to be a safe place in which to open up about our lives, and perhaps more importantly, our woundedness. More people usually means more masks, more ego to ego engagement. Like 2 suspicious dogs meeting on the sidewalk, we sniff out each other's trust credentials before deciding, no thanks, to vulnerability and its possibility of further psychological pain. For true community to occur, a mutual trust must evolve, a respect for each other's inner wounds. The danger of pseudo-radical groups where vulnerability and openness to leadership is expected without reciprocation is, from my painful experience, a recipe for psychic disaster. So how do we find such authentic community amongst the hustle and bustle of our daily lives? Well, thankfully, I believe that divine love has it all prearranged and well under control. Rather than scurrying around looking for a safe shelter in the religious marketplace of Christendom or any other faith brand, why not relax and give yourself a break? Remember, the God of Yeshua isn't looking for our commitment to a group, but rather a letting go or surrender to its love. As we tentatively take our first steps along such a path, others will unexpectedly cross our paths, those with whom we can explore mutual healing and a future destiny. Some of these fellow travelers stay joined for years, others for only a short period of time. A truly organic community, one birthed in the radical discovery of mimetic freedom.